it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We talk running, fitness, mental health, and so many more topics. As the founder of a youth running program, I approach all of our conversations with our youth athletes in mind and kind of have a focus around those things. But as you will see, we are finding that all of these topics relate to runners and people who like to move and do fitness or anything like that. Relates to everybody. Check it out. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's me, Coach Tori, and of course, I have one of my favorite guests, and I don't even feel bad saying that. We have the undefeated, undisputed champion of the world, my dad, aka Java Cat, the most busy retired person on the planet. I feel like my intros get worse and worse. Hey, Dad.
No, that was spot on. Hi, Coach Tori. How are you? And you were. I can say that now because you're my coach.
Yes, I know, how fun. Well, so
Yeah.
everybody, my dad just hired me as a coach, even though I do like the least amount of coaching for him possible, but how
I don't know.
fun.
I had you analyzing cadence videos, and I've been doing all of your advised workouts, as challenging as they have been, because I missed one the other day. So
Have you done any of the running form stuff I sent you?
I've tried a couple of my. I was going to wait till you do a track workout one day, and then maybe just join you for because it's I have seen the videos, watched the videos, but executing what I see and then what I am doing, I think I'm doing what they're doing, but it's hard to see yourself.
Yeah. Okay. We'll definitely have to plan that. Because now Saturday soccer is getting in the way. So
Okay.
but we'll have to do a track workout a different day during the
Yep.
week. Cool. Okay, so back on track, everybody. Today we are going to be doing a brief review of 4 of the many captivating books that are focused on running. As we know, there are so many, and my dad has read more than I have. But the 4 books take the readers on an exciting journey through the realm of endurance, perseverance, and the boundless human spirit. But before we get to our book review / book chat, we're going to talk a little bit about our training update, because when this episode comes out, we will be probably in the week of our 12-hour ultra relay. So how's training going? Besides, you just said that you hired me as your coach.
Yeah, no, it's going well. I'll just say I've been running consistently 40 miles a week, following the 80-20 rule. So only one of those runs is at a high level of intensity. That's my Tuesday runs. And the other 3 or 4 runs, depending on the week, are all at, I'll call it an easy pace, although there's nothing easy about running 15 or 20 miles. But yeah, so that's all going good. Still lifting consistently 3 days a week. So I feel like I'm in really good shape physically. I also, ran a marathon like maybe 2 weeks ago, just on a whim. I'll call it a whim. Just a little bit behind on my training for a week, and decided to go do a marathon. It'd be a little easier to run, I thought, with a group than to try to go run 25 miles on my own. And then did a half marathon in May in Jacksonville, Florida, a trail marathon. So both of those runs, I felt like I did them more as training runs. They weren't races for me, so I wasn't pushing the envelope to say, okay, I'm going to be on the verge of finishing, not finishing. So both of them I finished easily. My times were fine. Nothing I was, going to brag about necessarily, but, finished the 26 miles without stopping, which was an accomplishment for me. If you've heard my prior podcast, I failed miserably in my prior 2 marathon attempts. So, yeah, so I feel like I'm in good shape. I'm now targeting to do a really marathon in late August, to do like I'll call it a serious effort, where I'm probably at risk of blowing up at some point during that race.
Yeah. And that's the one that we talked about, right?
Yeah, that's the one. It's in Philadelphia. It's an out and back half marathon, and then you go out and back again. Relatively flat. The one I did do 10 days ago was not flat. It was a trail type environment, but it was a lot of hills. It was on a paved path, so it had the feel of a trail, but the pavement of a road race. So it was a little bit unique. And it was certainly one that highlighted up front. It said, if you're not a serious runner, don't try this marathon. So I'm like, okay, I'll go out there with at least an attitude of I'll give my best shot and just go easy. So I felt good.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. And you have your fueling plan all figured out. You're feeling good for like taper and all that stuff.
Yeah, I am. I'm feeling good about at least the fueling. I've been experimenting with these long runs on, what I'm going to eat. Done that a few times. So now I feel like I know my plan on race day for what I'll eat before and during the run. So a lot of trial and error, but I think I've gotten it a little bit dialed in.
Yeah,
The
that's
tapering
awesome.
part of it, I don't know that I'm fully with the tapering yet because I'm a little bit. If I'm targeting a marathon in 2 months,
Right.
do I want to taper significantly for this run coming up in mid-July, or just treat it like a training run and just a very, very long training run? So we'll see.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I didn't even
I'll talk
think
to my
about
coach about it and see what she says.
your coach forgot about the race, the one that really matters. So yeah, no, I'll have to readjust some of that because I was one track mind,
Yeah. Oh yeah. The last thing I'll say is I'm sort of capping myself at 40 miles a week, so I am trying to still add to my training and endurance. So I'm adding now a bike once a week. But it's first week was last week. I just did 20 minutes just to get used to it, and I'll just keep adding to that as being some additional mileage, additional cardio work. But I don't want to go past 40 miles, at least for my body at my age. I feel like I'm already pushing the limits.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. We talked about that a little bit. I feel like now
Yep.
that's coming back to me. Awesome. All right.
How about you? How's your training
Uh,
coming?
well, you know,
I've seen your videos where you post and saying that this I'm seeing long runs happening, that kind of stuff.
oh, yeah, no, the post was saying I'm not doing anything right. That's what that post was about. Um, yeah, it's not going at all how I planned, but such is life, right? Um, I feel like it'll be interesting for sure. I feel like I'll definitely be able to avoid getting hurt because I think I know enough about um my abilities and running to, successfully at least do something, keep moving for, I can move for 12 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is. How fast, we don't know. And my longest run has only been about 7 miles. I've had one long quotes, everybody, long 7 mile run pain free. So that's kind of speaking to how that has been going, which is
That's
not,
awesome.
yeah, that was super exciting. Just still, again, not at all what I was thinking or hoping or planning. Yeah, I just got over respiratory something or other like 2 weeks ago. So I kind of like threw a hitch again in like a whole week of no training. So yeah, so focusing on the things I can focus on. So trying to at least do runs as often as I can, even if they're short, kind of not stressing too much about that. Just because any amount is going to help. Got the fueling thing down. Like I think I was telling you the one time we were running was like I can eat Chick-fil-A and go for a run. So I feel pretty confident in my stomach at least. Have all of my different, not gels, but like gummies and stuff figured out for while I'm actually running and things to figure out for between, on breaks. I feel like mental game's pretty strong. So yeah, focused on what I can. And, this will just be, like you said, a fun training run. And hopefully again, marathon I don't think I'll be able to do that one because I think the one that you signed up for actually did close that day you signed up, but hoping for a fall marathon and hoping to just kind of keep on that trajectory of finding some more time, being able to run pain-free. So
Well,
yeah.
I told you I'm going to do the one in August, assuming again everything goes according to my plans, but you never know. But
Yeah.
and then I'm certainly committed to do the one that whatever one you want to do. I think the Philadelphia one in like November timeframe. That certainly works for me. I may have that short surgical procedure to do before then, so that may take me out for a few weeks, but I can do that in September and still, I think, get back on track for November.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. So stay tuned on that. We'll be training for a marathon, hopefully at some point. Hopefully I can get past this 7-mile slump that I'm in. Although I'm like, who has the time to run for longer than an hour? Certainly not me right now. But unless you have anything else to say about training before I keep just rambling on, let's get into our books. So we're going to do a brief summary of each of the 4 books, and then talk a little bit just about like our impressions, kind of rating them different ways. You know, I like to talk about the running and the mental health piece and everything I'm talking about. So we'll get into that stuff. There will be some slight spoilers, I guess, just in like themes and content, something. So again,
Yeah,
I will
we'll try not to spoil the major part of the stories. That, I mean, none of them are necessarily, you know, mysteries per se.
Right. No, I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was like, do I even have to say like a spoiler alert? Because it's like, yeah, it's not like a thriller, a mystery. There's no like, you know, not that there's no narrative, but it's like, yeah, there's not much to spoil. It's just like a book about running. But yeah, so we're talking about books. If they're books that you want to read and you don't want to know anything about them yet, skip it. Did you want to do the first summary, or do you want me to do the first one?
I'll do the first one, and then we can decide. I mean, I can do them. I'll start with Born to Run.
All right. So we're talking about Born to Run.
Yeah, so Born to Run, that was released in 2009. The author was Christopher McDougall. It's really it's certainly from his perspective. It's his objective is to find the Tarahumara indigenous tribes, which is of the sort of Copper Canyons of Mexico, and they're famous for their long distance running. So his main objective in the book is to, you know, find these runners, sit down and talk with them, and try to find out what makes them so unique in their ability to run long distances. So that's sort of the main theme. And then when we get into a little bit more, we'll go into, you know, some of the sub themes that he really gets into and what makes that book so good, because we're referencing a book from 2009. I will say it's probably one of the ones that it's on the tops of most running book lists, even though it is from 2009. So it's a little bit dated, but it's also a great book for anyone who likes to read. It's not just you know, it's not just for running inspiration. It is really a book that you'll find entertaining at really anybody reading that book.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So you want to talk about the other 3 books real quick, and then from a high level summary, then we can go back into talk about Born to Run.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
We can do it.
sure.
Summaries of all of them. Go for it.
Yeah. So the next book, the next section, I'll call it, you know, David Goggins' 2 books. And I just put those 2 together, Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished, because they're very similar. They really go through, it's his autobiography, I say, just so to speak, and really is talking about his life, and, you know, who he is a Black man, an African American man who grew up in poverty, facing challenges of racism, an abusive father, and how he came out on the other side, and became sort of became a Navy SEAL. That's one of his obviously major accomplishments. He's also an ultra runner, also a motivational speaker. So it's really a book of all of that, but it really gets deeply into his relationship with his father, gets into fitness, and really gets into what makes David Goggins tick, like what, you know, that he's more dedicated than probably anyone else on the planet as far as, you know, digging deep and challenging himself. So we'll talk about some unique aspects of those 2 books. And then the 4th book is The Longest Race by Kara Goucher, and we both read that one. You know, that's again, autobiography by Kara about her running life. It's probably briefly goes through her young childhood, but it really gets into much more around her high school, college, and then really into the Nike project. And what the Nike project is it's Nike, the company, who really had Alberto Salazar, who's a famous marathoner from the 80s, maybe somewhere in that range. Um, and he was the coach of this project. And the idea of the project was to elevate US and American runners on the world stage. So we had a group of runners, all essentially male except for Kara. And it's really around her relationship with that coach and with Nike, the overall organization and the challenges that she faced in that process. And she was a great, I'll put her in a great category of U.S. runners. I mean, there's not a huge list of great, American female distance runners, but she's in that list somewhere. So I'd say that's the sort of the high level of the 3/4 categories.
Well, those were great summaries. That was really good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I may have stole some of that from you and from ChatGPT. So who knows?
Yeah, I know. AI, it's in everything now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So back to Born to Run, we can start by talking about that one a little bit first. So you mentioned it is top of most running lists. And yeah, like if you Google top running books, Born to Run definitely shows up. I think most runners, if you talk to them, will say that they've read it or they've heard of it. I guess, do you want to start? Like, why do you even think this book is top of the running? I know you just said before it was like just a great book for anyone who likes to read, but thoughts on that to start?
Yeah, no, agreed. Thank you. I think what makes this book, this is of all the books that I've probably read, I've read 15 books. Right, again, I'll use read loosely because most of those I listened to, but I did read some of them physically. And that's in just 2023. It is the best story told book, right? So I think that he's the best, probably maybe the best writer, is that the way to say it? In telling that story, it's you want to know what's going to happen. It does pull you along. There's 2 or 3 different themes in it. So I think it's the best written book. That's why I say it's probably for anyone who likes to read. It's a great book. The only thing I think was comparable that was also on a lot of the running books is Once a Runner. But it's a fictional story. And what makes, I think, Born to Run so amazing is it's a true story. It feels like fiction as you're sort of listening to it, because it's talking about the Tarahumara Indians, these ultra runners who, ran against the, best US runners and beat them in these various ultra running events. And it's like, is that true? And you like look it up, like, yeah, it's true. So I think the fact that it's true, the fact that he's a great writer, those 2 things combined is why it's on top of my list. I found it entertaining, whether I was a runner or not. I thought it was a great book.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can tell, like you're saying, he was a writer to start. Like he didn't just decide like, I love running, I'm going to write about running. It was like, this was his job. And it was like, I happened upon, these ideas and found the story and all this stuff. So yeah, you can definitely tell that this is like his thing. Yeah. And I first heard of the book when it first came out when I was still in high school. And it was like the one book our coach would not stop talking about. And it took me forever to actually read it. And yeah, I mean, it's a great story and it mixes like the science with the storytelling and different studies and different things he learned in like different aspects of things. So yeah, it really ties all that stuff together, and it does bounce around a little bit, I think. And we've talked about this before, but yeah, it is such a fun story. It has like suspense and excitement, and you care about the characters, and just everything about it. You're like, I'm learning new things about running and physiology, but then I'm also just like hearing about this really fun race too, and then hearing about people that we still hear about in running, like Scott Jurek, for example, right? He was there. Anyone who follows long distance running knows his name, knows about him. So it's like, oh my gosh, he was a part of this too, so it's like you get like a little celebrity sighting, which makes it kind of fun too.
Yeah, no, it is amazing because, and by the way, ChatGPT gave this 4 out of 5. I give it, I'll say 10 thumbs up, if that's such a thing. But that's my rating system is, but ChatGPT had it 4.5 out of 5, and actually had rated the Goggins book, Can't Hurt Me, as 5 out of 5. But we'll come back to that in a moment. But yeah, I do think the one detraction that ChatGPT mentioned was that the book does have a number of what feels like tangents early on, but I do think he ties it all together. And one and two, those tangents, or those, you know, those areas of the story that you're not sure where they're going initially, they're also well told. So they're entertaining, but you just don't know how it's going to fit into the overall story initially, as sort of you go into that chapter and you start listening to it. You're like, okay, where's this going? Because he does take a lot of different directions. You know, he gets into the science, he gets into the evolution of human beings going way back when. You know, were we built to run? So he gets into the science of that, to trying to prove that, you know, that is what, you know, we were built to do long distance runs, not, you know, not like other, I guess, Homo sapiens at the time, if I got that term right. So
yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because again, like he does kind of bounce all over talking about, you know, science and things from the past and evolution and all that stuff. But then, you know, there's parts where I don't remember who the scientist or researcher, whoever it was, but like they took ideas from, you know, back when the Homo sapiens or whoever it was, again, I should have looked that up, you know, hunted and all those things. And then they actually like implemented that. And there was like, you know, two people in now time out running around, you know, running down deer or whatever it was. You know, it's just like the whole thought of that is just, it's like comical, but like fascinating. And, you know, just
yeah,
like
they
those
actually
kinds of interesting things, right?
yeah, that's right. I mean, I think they had to test the theories, right? It was someone went out and actually tried to test that theory that a human could outrun, you know, an antelope, right? Whatever the animal was. That and I think the initial thing was that they struggled because the antelope wasn't too concerned, because it would just go back into the tribe, and, you know, and back into the whole pack, and then you couldn't find out which one you just chased after for 10 miles, so that you were trying to wear him down. But, you know, so, but again, when you isolated one, they were actually able to, you know, run them to exhaustion, that humans could actually outrun the animals over that long distance. So again, it was fascinating. I loved it. Again, I think it has stood the test of time. It's a 2009 book that people still talk about today. And I think one other aspect of the book that I think was important, and still probably is to some degree, is the questioning of the shoe company concept, right? It's the book certainly says it more clearly. It's saying that simply these large shoes with the, you know, big heel cushions, you know, that, you know, Nike, and they point out Nike because Nike was the original one, but all these shoe companies that do this now, you know, you're promoting sort of heel striking, and you're not giving the foot the natural ability to develop and absorb and be its own shock absorber, and you're weakening the feet, not sort of protecting the body. And the science seems like it's mixed. It doesn't seem there's any definitive conclusion on that. Now, I will say it's been 15 years, 14 years. I don't see everyone running without these shoes on. So I will say that, you know, maybe there is something to these shoes. Now, I may not buy a new pair of shoes every 4 months now, because I probably don't need to, but I don't know that I could go out and run barefoot either. So
Yeah, well, and it's funny. When the first time I read the book, I think we also talked about this before, like definitely started experimenting with some barefoot running, just like different barefoot exercises and stuff like that, out of curiosity, because it really hadn't, you know, when you're in high school and in college, like no one's just like do something different. It's all just like whatever coach says we're doing that. You know, you're not like having your own ideas usually about your running and things like that. So I definitely started trying that stuff out and just found that to be fun, but it didn't really hit me as like a huge takeaway, honestly, from the book. I think mostly what I was thinking about just was kind of like the whole encompassing of like why these people were so good at running. And it kind of talked about like running just being the way of life. And, but they also found joy in it. It wasn't like a chore. It was just like what they did. They like to do. They turned running into games. the way they fueled, the way they ate, you know, all that stuff. So that was, I think, the thing that more like upfront resonated with me. And then, you know, just somehow seeping into there, like the shoes thing too. But yeah, I mean, after this book, I think lots of people had the same thoughts. You know, you ask about Born to Run and they're like, oh yeah, you know, running barefoot, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, we're all still wearing the shoes, and I still will do some barefoot runs, or, you know, like really minimalist shoe runs. I've been trying to do some more minimalist running shoes, but yeah, again, I mean, you know, I'm always like, oh, what's the newest whatever shoe? Like, I still want that. And we're all still wearing that. So it's interesting to see how that has impacted people. And I think they think about it a little more. And I know like lots of people, you know, have different thoughts on shoes, but they find what works for them. But yeah, it hasn't really doesn't seem like it's drastically changed much. I mean, there are more, at least I see more prominent minimalist running shoe companies coming out making different things. I think the newer Born to Run 2 book, they have like their own version of, it's like Zero shoes or something like that. Like made a Born to Run 2 really minimalist shoe. So, you know, there is like a little bit of change, but not anything crazy, I don't think, in the shoe realm of things.
Yeah, and I think Scott Jurek, he sort of took a middle ground. Like, he was obviously part of the Born to Run book. He has stressed it in his own book, just saying that he's gone not so far as to go to barefoot running, but he's going to more, like you just said, minimalist shoes. You know, maybe not quite the you know, the Hoka or the other, you know, maximum cushioning shoes. He does much more the racing flat type shoe, where it's much more minimalist. It's also hard, I think. You know, we grew up in a society where you wear shoes all the time, right? And you're comparing us to the Tarahumara, which, you know, either are wearing no shoes or wearing minimal shoes all the time in their training, right? So it's hard to bridge those two worlds and say, you know, that's one of the reasons they're the great runners, and if we just do that, we would be a great runner. I think that's too simple of an approach to take.
Oh yeah, and I mean, again, it's like you said, like the world we live in now, we're wearing shoes. Like, there's also not a lot of places I can just safely run barefoot and not be worried about all kinds of things happening, right? Like, I can't just be like, oh, I'll kick my shoes off, run down the street, and not step on glass, nails, God knows what. So, you know, it really, yeah, there is a balance there for sure on the shoe side
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah, and I think yeah, and the last thing, sorry, on
Oh no,
on
go
this
ahead.
book, we can jump on the next ones, which was, you know, the characters were so deep. I mean, I think you mentioned it early on, was like, you know, the development of those characters in Caballo Blanco. It almost felt like it, at least when I read the book, it felt like the story went from being Christopher McDougall's story to Caballo Blanco's story. And, you know, for the reader's benefit, listeners' benefit at the moment, he's a sort of an American that's down there, and sort of it's Christopher McDougall's conduit to get to the Tarahumara. But he becomes a big part of the story and what he's trying to accomplish. So again, yeah, I think he's probably one of the most interesting characters. And again, what makes it me fascinating is that it's a true story, that he was a true individual, that he had a life here in the U.S. and basically just moved there to change his own life.
Yeah, well, and like he's a great example of kind of finding the joy in running and how that can like completely change the way that you live and run and all that stuff. Because yeah, he was kind of living the way a lot of us do here, and kind of changed it all. And he's off the grid, or he was off the grid, and yeah, like running all the time, miles and miles every day. You didn't have a phone. I think he was like going to coffee shops to email back about his race. You know, it was definitely an interesting story. And yeah, he was very cool. And yeah, even all the other people that Chris found to be like a part of the event was kind of fascinating, where everybody came from. But you see like the through line of, they love adventure, they love running, they just wanted to be a part of something like really unique, you know?
Yeah, something special. Yeah, and it turned out to be, you know, again, something that we're talking about 15 years later. So,
Yeah,
do you want to move on to Goggins?
sure. Let's move on to this one. So these are two books that I have not read, but I'm familiar with him and familiar with some of the things he's done. So
yeah, because you gave me a book that was somewhat about him. Like that was the Living with a Seal, which was really David Goggins being hired to live with Jesse Itzler for a month to train him. It gives you that gave me sort of a glimpse into who he was, because I actually didn't know who he was before then. And these books, I think in the summary talked about the challenges that he faced as a young child. And what came to mind, given what your podcast is about, I mean, I think mental health is certainly one. He certainly didn't suffer necessarily like from depression. I can't believe he didn't have some level of anxiety. I mean, he talks a little bit about, the fear of, living in a house with an abusive father, right? It's not a fear that just goes away when you go to school. It's always there. I'm going to have to go home at the end of the day and face whatever, unpredictable situation there may be. So he certainly had like sort of, mental challenges as well as physical challenges. I think his two books, I think what made them unique for me is I listened to them on, they were books, audiobooks. And what he did that was unique was turned them into almost like a podcast. So between each chapter of the person reading his book, he would then, have a little bit of interview session with the reader. So it was almost like a podcast in between chapters where they would talk about some of the key elements of that chapter. And in the second book, he had the same format, and he had his mother on, which is a big part of the second book, his relationship with his mother, which he didn't really deal as much with in the first book. I think because it was, sensitive topic. Again, living in an abusive household for where you're being abused by your father, and it's also, again, physically abused, and so is your mother, and how she must feel not being able to protect herself and her sons. It is difficult that he didn't want to share that in the first book. It didn't feel like, and he saved that for the second book. So there's a lot of, I mean, it's an autobiography of his life. I mean, I think there's some key characters in it that changed his life. Certainly his mother was a key factor. I think he uses his father as sort of fuel, like what you can overcome. I think in one of your recent podcasts, you talked a little bit about, people overcoming a challenge in life and how that then can translate to running, to say, in those tough times of running, you can overcome it because you've overcome these other bigger barriers in the past. And so I think he uses it as that kind of a fuel, to be sort of, that dedicated, that intense, never taking a moment to just relax. It's always 110%. Yeah, so that was one thing that was unique. And then the other thing of the first book, the Can't Hurt Me, is it was a little bit of I'll call it a self-help book. It's not written like a self-help book. It's written more like he's talking about this accountability mirror, and he wants the reader to, at the end of each chapter or different spots, to sort of think about what their challenges are and what the hurdles are, and take responsibility for it. How are they going to overcome it? And so there's a self-help aspect to it that at the end of the book, if you do all these things, I think you'll find out some more about yourself in a way to overcome some of the challenges. Because that is one of the main themes of his books, is around what the human spirit's capable of doing. I mean, I think his theory is if we tap into maybe 40% of what we're capable of in running, meaning your body is screaming to stop at 40% of its threshold. And most of us stop at that 40% because it hurts. Our mind's telling us not to go on. You keep thinking about the fact that you got 9 more miles to go and there's no way you can finish it, not realizing if you just kept running for the next half hour, you might feel so much better. And then there's reward in that, overcoming that pain. So he walks through a lot of that. That's his deal. I don't have that kind of pain in my background to tap into. And like I said, this most recent run I did was one of the first times I've been sort of broken in the last several months on a run, where mentally I just wasn't capable of overcoming it. And I did you sort of kick yourself, like, darn, I thought I was mentally stronger than this to overcome this, but you live and learn. You go back to drawing board and you try it again. And he's a great example of that because he wanted to become a Navy SEAL, and it took him 3 tries to do that. So I think he's inspirational. I think he's motivational. So if you want to read a book that's going to make you question, you know if you think you've got it hard and you can't find the time to go run, or can't you get too many barriers, you look at what he's gone through and you're like, man, I got nothing to say. I should just put my shoes on and go for a run and be done with it. So yeah, I think that's the few things I would mention about his book. I think they're very well written. That you certainly get the sense of how much pain he went through as a child and how it fuels him today.
Yeah. Well, first thing I want to say, so I hopefully remember, this is a way late trigger warning to talk about abuse in a household. Oops, I will go back and hopefully remember to cut that in. So I'm sorry for anyone if I forget to do that. But also, where was I going to go after that? I had thoughts. Oh man. Well, so yes, in my episode released actually this week, I was talking with Rachel Clark about overcoming challenges, because I knew we were actually going to talk about this book when her and I chatted. So she is in recovery, and she also is a recovery coach. So we did talk about how is there some element to that, right? Of you've overcome something so hard, does that make you have more capabilities in endurance sports? And at least from her opinion, she was saying, yeah, totally, it does help translate to, like, yes, I've done this impossible seeming thing, this running is like nothing, right? So yeah, I think there's definitely a theme. People who have had lots of adversity are able to channel that to become like really resilient runners or people in endurance sports, which is pretty cool. And I know it wasn't from this book. Well, maybe it was, but we had talked when we talked about the other book, Living with a Seal, that you had read. One of the big things that wasn't really running related that you took away from just him as a person is like the way he lives with like simplicity and like no excess and stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah. So yeah, and when we talked about that book before, just actually because I think I borrowed it from you.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. He was a guy that showed up on like the first of that month with a backpack. Just very simple, right? It was like he's like, well, where's the room? He just went to his room. He did his exercises. He just led. And I won't say simple is the right word, but it was, that's the best word I can come up with. Maybe it's just it's focused. It's his life was around just fitness, exercise, and everything else was sort of a distraction. He didn't bring 5 suitcases full of stuff and 20 pairs of shoes. It was just like whatever he could fit in the backpack. That's what he had for the month, and didn't seem like he missed a beat. And it sort of inspired me at least to say, you know what, do I got all this, like I go into my closet to get something and I've got, 20 shirts to choose from, and like I really only wear like 4 of them. So let me just get rid of the other ones. I don't need them, just, give them to Goodwill. So I tried to at least simplify my own life and make my choices a lot less simple for myself. I enjoy it now. Like I walk in my closet, it's wide open. There's plenty of room. I've got a few things to choose from. I pick it, and then I just do my laundry every more than once a week now. I can't go 2 weeks without doing laundry.
Right. Yeah. And that I think also kind of ties a little bit into when we talked about, Born to Run and like running just being a part of your life. But yeah, it is like that simplicity too. Like it's just, you don't have to have all these fancy shoes, extra baggage, overly complicate everything, right? Like it's just like, this is how we live. We get up, we run, we do our thing. And it seems like he kind of subscribes to that too. I know he gets a little bit of flack sometimes in the running community for his intensity, and maybe some other things. Honestly not totally sure. He's obviously an intense guy.
Yeah.
And now I think I first heard about him when they talked about like the David Goggins challenge of like, what is it, 4x4x48. And you know, people love to talk about that one as well, but I'm pretty sure you, because you're the 80-20 advocate over here, you said that he mentions that he follows the 80-20 rule for running. Is that right?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. So it is only mentioned in passing. It's not like it's a big part of his book.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard. Sometimes it's confusing when you listen to him, right? Because he's talking about the level of intensity. I think it's really, in my mind, it's more around dedication. Like he'll get up at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. and go do his 20-mile run. But he's not doing his 20-mile run at maximum capacity. He's doing it as an easy run. Now, so his intensity comes across as, well, he's running all out all the time. He's saying, no, that's not the case. The reason I don't get hurt is I do follow an 80-20 rule. So yeah, there's a small piece of one of his chapters that goes into that, but it's very short and gets kind of lost in his overall intensity. But he's a guy that, you don't miss a workout. You just get up and you do it. You don't whine about it. He actually tapes himself sometimes if he sort of has like this internal struggle about doing something. He'll tape himself and then play it back, and he says, like, I can hear what a little bee I am being right now, and I just said the B word, not the actual word. So he just like he'll listen to it and then like that's it. Like he'll say, okay, I'm just gonna just put my shoes on and go. Or he'll all the negative comments that you can get on social media, he'll read them into his recorder and then listen back to them, or he even made like a short like a rap type song out of them just to again motivate himself. Like people saying he can't do it, he can do it. So I think
Yeah.
that intensity gets confused with going all out all the time. But now he does say he follows sort of an 80-20 concept, that he doesn't do this at intensity, but he does do it all the time. He runs all the time. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of days off, but that doesn't mean he's not following an 80-20 concept.
Yeah, no, that totally does make sense, because I think it's sometimes hard for us to picture someone who can be that intense of like, oh, he still goes out on like his easy runs and he takes it easy in quotes, is like, yeah, you can still be super intense about your run, even if you're doing it at a simple, slower pace or whatever it is.
Yeah, so I want to be like a baby Goggins, not like a Goggins light, but I want to be even less than that, like just a baby version of it. Like where like, I can't get up at 5 a.m. I did it the one day I told you. I got up at 5 a.m. and after I finished one of his 2 books and went out for a run, and it was miserable. It was the worst 10 miles I'd run in a long time. And I'm like, man, I'm not doing that ever again. But I don't have to. Like he can run at 5 a.m. I can run at 5 p.m. I can do that. He can do it every day. He can run like 70 to 120 miles a week. I'm going to cap mine at 40. Like I can't do that. I'll throw all this stuff out of my closet. I can't live out of a backpack. I still need a house, and so I need all that stuff still. So I'm just going to be a baby version of Goggins.
Yeah, I like it. I think
Yeah.
that sounds like it works for you.
Yeah.
I dig it. All right. Anything else about him or his books? Only because I
Yeah.
don't feel like I have too much to add.
No, they're. I mean, again, I give them a very high rate. I'm not quite the Born to Run, because I think Born to Run just translated to everybody in my mind. For Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished, I think they're great books.
Yeah.
I'd say they're 9.5 thumbs out of 10
Oh my
versus 10 out of
gosh.
10. But if you're looking to find for some motivation, yeah, read those books. You will be motivated. Now, hopefully, you can translate that motivation into then dedication and discipline, to where you can do it every day. Motivation may get you out there the first time, the second time, third time for a week or two, but ultimately you need to have discipline to sort of get out there for months and months and months, and that's really where the benefit comes in. It's going out there for that first week is great. It's you really got to do it for a long period of time. Um, and I think that one of your maybe the last couple of podcasts you've had, they've referenced mental health and fitness, and I think they even reference the studies. There's hundreds of studies that show that fitness and mental health is that fitness and exercise is at least as effective, if not more effective, than therapy and drugs. Now, certainly, I am not a doctor, so I'm just saying that it's not, it's hard, I guess, when people are depressed to say, oh, okay, let's go out and run a 5K. That's really hard to do. It's a little easy to go see someone and have therapy or take medication. But maybe as sort of a, as if you are suffering from mental illness, just take that first step, man. Just get out the door and do that little bit of like those studies. You didn't have to go out and run at a 10-mile, or a 6-minute pace. You had to just go out there and do a brisk walk, and you were getting the benefits of exercise on your mental health. So you really just need to go out there and just do it that first, second, or third time. And then it starts to feed on itself. You start to see that benefit. You start to feel a little bit better and more likely to want to go out and run. So, I mean, I think I just wanted to applaud like what you're doing, and then those last couple of podcast guests had referenced those studies, and I just want to reemphasize that how important that really is. It shouldn't be understated that it is as effective as therapy, but it'd be even more effective if you do both. Like go to your therapy classes and then go for a little bit of a walk, jog, run on another day or the day after, the same day, what are you going to do? So that's my
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there have been some great guests recently who've worked in like the clinical setting with for mental health treatment, whether it was addiction or other kinds of like social work, clinical social work and things like that. And yeah, they are talking about they've done a lot of studies for especially with related to depression and anxiety and the other symptoms that go along with those types of mental health struggles is, yeah, I mean, 20 minutes a couple times a week for like 2 weeks, people were seeing really significant changes in their symptoms. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to find different therapists and other, again, there's lots of different avenues now with those kinds of things that you can find people who can help integrate those, running with, talk therapy, medication, any of those kinds of things. So, it is great that there are so many people who are willing to look at all the avenues there to help with mental health. So thank you for the mental health plug, because we always love to hear it, love to chat about it. Speaking of mental health, Kara Goucher struggled with her mental health a lot. Let's chat about her book.
Yeah, that's a good segue.
Yeah.
It's her book, as I said, it's mostly about the Nike project, but you certainly she gives you a glimpse into the younger life, right? How something small like her grandfather taking her on, I think that first fun run that she went on, started something in her that turned into a long-term professional career. Like if she hadn't done that, how many kids don't have that opportunity, don't get that first run, don't find that they're good at something? Because we tend to gravitate to things that we're good at, right? Like people don't love to go do things that they're bad at on a regular basis. That's not a lot of fun. But would she have ever discovered that? I don't, it's hard to say, right? It's maybe she would have gone into a different sport, but I think, her book is I think there's a lot of, when I read it, I'll call it sadness for lack of a better term. Alberto Salazar, her coach, was one of the probably heroes of my era. I mean, in the early 80s is when I was graduating high school, and I ran in high school and I ran in college. And so, someone like Alberto Salazar was winning the Boston Marathon in dramatic fashion. It's he was a little bit of a hero. But when you read this book, you see what unfortunately what 20 years can do to someone. And I know it's written from her perspective, so I'll give him, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt necessarily, but I'm saying I don't want to necessarily just trash the guy unnecessarily, but he certainly is not a positive figure in this book. I mean, he is her running coach. He may have done a lot of good things in coaching, but you saw the mental aspects that the toll he took on her, and we see these runners and they run the Olympics, and you think that, oh, it's the person who's trained the most, and you just think of them as almost like machines. I thought Kara's book was great, that it gave you the insight into her mind. I know she read her own book as the reader, which not many of them do, and she's not a professional reader, so it can maybe be a little bit distracting because professional readers are professional readers for a reason. But I loved hearing her talk about her words and how she felt. It just resonated with me more effectively. But yeah, she seemed like she faced a lot of challenges, being the only woman in the Nike project. So I'm going to jump from her early life, past high school, because she was successful in high school, successful in college. Dealt with some injuries right after college, but really got into the Nike project, and that's really early on in this book, and that's the most of this book. But the mental toll that it took on her, it seems like it was significant. Things that I'm sure other people didn't notice, comments that were made about her weight or of sexual innuendo, that type of stuff. It takes its toll on people that even if they chuckle it off, she may have chuckled some of those things off, but it wasn't just forgotten about in her mind. It still bothered her as she left practice and walked away. And, that combined with, she was the minority in this situation, right? She's on a male dominated running team coached by a male for a male dominated organization, goes to HR and it's a male. It just, she goes to the therapy session the therapist that they have. That's a male, right? It just you felt isolated for her, is what I took from the book. And I think mental health is a good topic, because it's not your traditional depression or anxiety, but it is a mental toll that was taking on her. You could tell that, and the doping is the sort of secondary theme, I think, here, right? Is the questions around Alberto Salazar and the techniques he maybe used to help the runners achieve that success, and the toll that took on her as well. And she's not been accused of using drugs, by the way, or doing doping. So it was really more her knowledge or suspicion of what may have been going on with other runners in the program.
Yeah. So this time I'll remember, slight trigger warning before we get started. There is abuse, sexual abuse as such in her book. So I may end up talking about that by accident. I don't have plans on bringing that up necessarily, but you never know once I start talking. So it could come out. So yes, we will talk about that slightly with her book. And if you read her book, they do a good job saying that there's going to be topics of abuse talked about. But yeah, so to start with the mental side of things, for sure, I think, yeah, like you said, male dominated environment. They had that sports psychologist who was he not actually a clinical psychologist or whatever it was? He didn't have any no doctorate degree or anything. So the team is seeing this sports psychologist who is not actually anything that he claimed to be. And then she talks about how not only did, there was all kinds of problems with Alberto's coaching methods, but the team, the psychologist, I wish I could remember what his name is. But they're making her feel isolated from her husband as well, who was a part of the team. They're putting ideas in her head to make her feel doubt in that relationship. She obviously had problems with the guilt of suspecting the doping. I know they get more into the doping and stuff with that too, but just seeing things that she seemed a little off with that. So I'm sure that can also weigh on someone mentally as well. And then you had mentioned, the comments to other athletes, to herself, just like negative, derogatory. There was lots of discussion on weight and different kinds of physical appearances too. So all of those things made for a really bad environment, which she does talk about. And again, like we said, if you listen to the audiobook, she does read it. And yes, not a professional reader. I had my critiques, of course, but you can hear, you really feel that the toll all of what she'd been through took on her. And one thing that I always thought of was she seemed like she's struggled with a couple different major-ish injuries in her professional career, but it doesn't seem, at least I didn't have that takeaway of like those things were what were really, really hard on her. Like she does mention that, like, you know, she wondered, am I going to recover from this one? You know, I have to put all this work in, but at least in my opinion, it seemed like she focused so much more on like all of the things that were draining her and making it a bad environment. It never was really the actual physical injuries or any of that kind of stuff, which was cool to see. And to balance out the mental side of everything, I think she also really explains how hard that group worked. Like, you know, there was a lot of really interesting things and innovative ideas that they were trying, the Oregon Project. So it was nice to also get to hear about, yeah, it made sense why some of this group was amazing, and you know why she transformed from being like a great runner to like a really, really great runner. It was how, I mean, they really did seemed like they worked harder than everybody else. They tried things people didn't do, all of the altitude training. You know, again, like there was probably some things that may not have been so great. Like they were very isolated from the running community as well. They weren't allowed to interact with others when they went to meets. You know, they couldn't talk. She had like a special burner phone when they would go to like, you know, different events, like, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff. But there was so much that they were trying to do that was, you know, really interesting for the sport, that really was trying to bring like America back on top of long distance running. So I thought that was really cool to hear about all of that as well. Alongside of like all of the negatives too. But that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think then it just gets into those fine lines, right? It's you know, the stated mission is to elevate American running, and you know, someone decides that, you know, thyroid medication maybe is one of the ways that you can isn't banned substance, and maybe these people have thyroid problems, you can't say, but statistically it seemed odd that the entire team almost, and again, I'm speculating on how they did it, but you know, I think it showed the dirty side of a sport, right? It wasn't just you know, it doesn't mean Kara wasn't running 120 miles a week. She was, right? And that's the 95% of the benefits, or 99% of the benefits she was getting. And in her case, it's 100%, right? But other runners that were being accused, or at least speculated that they may be using other substances, you know, how much that's benefiting them, it's hard to say. But that was sort of that fine line, which is like trying to push the envelope to elevate a sport, or Americans in that sport. And you know, that if you don't have a good ethical leader with moral fiber, that they can cross that line. And it seemed like in this case it got crossed a number of times. Yeah. The other thing about Kara and just her mental struggles was, I think the other toll that we didn't mention was her contract with Nike, and you know, getting pregnant. And it was, I guess, enlightening for me as a man. I don't think of these things, right? It's unfortunate. Like, it just doesn't. It's not as top of mind, and it's top of mind for probably most women. Is, you know, will they have a job when they go out on maternity leave? And I think it's probably less of an issue today than maybe it was in her time. But it's not a done deal, done issue. It's still out there for people. And again, maybe I've just been not as aware of it as I should have been. But yeah, she faced an issue around just having Nike honor her contract, and again, the mental toll it took to dispute that, and having no leverage in her situation to sign deals that, well, we'll advance you the money, but you may have to refund it later on. It's like, oh man, what choices did she have? So again, just go back to that mental aspect of it. It's tough.
Yeah, and the timing of the book, I think, was, I don't know if it was intentional or just kind of happened that way, but yeah, there has been in the past year, I would say, a lot of positive changes for female athletes in general, but female runners with, you know, contract negotiations, figuring out things for maternity leave, returning to running, you know, all that kind of stuff. So there really has been some nice changes that way, but then you also see where there hasn't been changes, there are now more like female focused brands that are trying to get into the space, that are also trying to help support. So I know she also talks about, once she left Nike and was doing her own thing and looking for sponsors, and she talks a lot about the struggle with that whole end of it, of finding the right sponsors and people who had the money but also had the vision and all that stuff. And now I think you see that a lot more. Like Lululemon, I think, has been sponsoring, especially in like the ultra space. They're Camille Herron's new sponsor, new at this point, it's probably not that new, but she's sponsored by them, like and they're doing a really cool like women only ultra event. So like there are some things where they are trying to make some nice positive changes there for female in sports. So it was cool timing for her book, I think. But I know she also has been like really trying to help drive these changes as well.
Yeah, no, it's nice to see that there's a little momentum going the right way. I'm sure if we look at all of the dollars spent, it will be vast majority are going to men's programs and men athletes. And there are still many more male dominated companies that are probably in that space. So it is, like I said, it's encouraging. It's going the right direction. Probably a long way to go still, and hopefully that momentum will stay there.
Yeah.
And yeah. So again, this one's 8.5 thumbs up or 9. Maybe I should go. Yeah, 8.5 thumbs up, maybe 9 thumbs up on Kara Goucher's book. Again, I think there was a lot there, a lot to unpack. Not as well written as a sort of a Born to Run, not as intense as a David Goggins, but a good story, true story, and women athletes in these kinds of books are underrepresented, and I think her book's one that should be top of the list.
Yeah. Well, that is a really high scale for all of these books. The first 4, because we're hoping to probably do some more book chats as time goes on. So I feel like it's hard to top what a 10, 9 something, and 8.5.
9.5, and I'll go 8.5 for Kara's, but depending on what you're looking for, I'm going to just say I'll stick with my 10, 9.5, and 8.5. And the only reason Goggins gets 9.5 and maybe is I love the intensity and I love the motivation. So he probably resonates more with me. So maybe someone else reads it who's not looking for that other book may give it a lower rating. I don't know. It's like I said, ChatGPT gave it a 10. So it's to each his own.
Yeah, well, to close out on these books, these 4 books, like you've said a bunch of times, I think will captivate you as you delve into the world of running and endurance, from the rugged trails of the Copper Canyons with the Tarahumara to the transformative power of running in David Goggins' life, and then Kara Goucher's rise to greatness amid adversity. These stories really will inspire you and move you definitely to want to put on those shoes to get out and go run. So I think you did pick a great start for the 4 books that we had today. Do you have thoughts on next books or anything like that?
Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts. I'll wait though, because I want to discuss with you ahead of time whether we want to go the ultra space, because there's a lot of ultra running is sort of I'll call it a niche a little bit. Like, it does feel like it's like something I hadn't even thought about. Like I thought marathons were sort of as long as people ran, maybe just a few years ago, but ultras have been going on for like 100 years and I didn't even know it. So it is a bunch that are ultra related. There are some that are motivational. So there's a bunch of different categories we can get into.
Yeah.
A couple of them involve the 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, stay tuned, everybody, for our next book chat. I'll try to maybe put a poll up to see if you have suggestions for the next time, or I'll put it on social media to see if anybody has any thoughts of different ones we should do. And also, by the time this is coming out, we will be probably within a week of our 12-hour relay that some of us are training for better than others. So wish us luck. And because I think it will be very interesting, I will try to take some voice recordings and put together some little show during our run so that you can kind of hear from us while we're actually doing all the work, and kind of see if it's playing out how we thought it was going to or not. Anything else in closing you have? Thanks so much for all your thoughts on the books.
No, just want to thank you again. Appreciate it. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will be chatting soon. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all the things that you can do for a podcast that you enjoy listening to. Make sure you check out social media, our website, any of those things. If you have questions, comments, interview requests, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.